everyone. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. I'm Anastasia from Florida. Thank you for having me today. I'm really honored to be here. And I thought I would start by telling you a little bit about me. Okay, I have been blind since birth. I was raised in New York, but my family now live in Florida. We have been there for 27 years. I went to went to Commerce College for my bachelor's. I was a history major. And then I earned my master's in applied linguistics, which is teaching English as a second language. And over the years, of course, I accumulated a lot of life experience, not just from going to college, but from my own experiences with my family, from traveling abroad. And over the years, many people have asked me questions about, well, how do I live? How do I study? How can I make it through college? What are my hopes for the future? How do I live independently? So one day I decided to sit down and write a book. And that's how I became invited to UMBC, which was to speak about my book. And when I sat down to write my book, I conceptualized it. I thought, well, what type of a book do I want? Do I want a book that just tells my story as most traditional autobiographies do? Or do I want a book that not only tells my story, but encourages people in all professions of all ages to reflect on themselves and to think and to become agents for change? So what I did, I not only wrote my story in my book, but I created my fourth section is pretty much kind of a little bit more academic in that it reflects and it brings in different articles of studies that have been done on the issues that are relevant to my story, which is not only just blindness, but social work issues such as frequent moving, gambling, in my family, domestic violence, and even travel. So that is, in essence, a little bit about me. So my presentation today is going to be, it's general for this group. It's about my book, and it's going to cover pretty much an overview of my book. And like, for example, I have the topics arranged by what's in the book, like gambling, moving, separation, travel, and that's in essence how I have the book arranged in the final part, which is the reflective part. So I'll start with this thing. It says purpose of book. That should be the first thing that's up. And again, the purpose of my book was to encourage everyone to reflect and to become agents for change. That is my hope, because I think we all can do that. And then under the purpose of book, I've got bring to light issues concerning raising children. It's very broad. Okay, it's any child, not just a blind child, but any child. Because a lot of the issues that I speak about in my book can happen to any family. For example, the domestic violence, that has nothing to do with blindness. That was an issue that was between my parents' marriage. Now, blindness, of course, it's a part of the book because I am blind, of course, and I speak about being raised as a blind child, but how I had to go to school and learn Braille, how I had to be taught how to pour juice, how to cook, how to do all of this stuff that you learn to do just by seeing. I had to physically be taught, not only academically, but in my academic curriculum, some of this stuff was included. Then the next topic is, the reason why I wrote the book is to bring to light concerning issues related to blindness. Again, it's a broad topic, and in my case, which is not just about raising blind children, but about issues that we face afterwards, which are issues relating to employment and education and living independently. So those are some of the issues that my book brings to light, and how, again, social workers and everyone can be advocates and agents for change for those of us who have visual impairments and encounter issues because we're not often understood. Not all the time, but a lot of times. And then the second slide is here are social work topics. And the first one is impact of emotional abuse on children. Now, in my family, there was a lot of emotional abuse, verbal abuse. And for example, my parents calling each other very bad names, and also for me, telling me, for example, well, you can't go to college because you can't see. How can you do the work? How can you read? Or you can't get on stage and sing or whatever because you can't see. These were some of the things I was told a lot, over and over and over, and it affected my confidence a lot when I was a child, and I had to later get counseling. So basically, the impact of all this, it's traumatic, including the domestic violence that we had to face at home. And I say traumatic because it affects you. You feel unsure of yourself, you become depressed, you become unhappy, and even in my adult life sometimes, and if I smell something, or if there's a word or a place where I might be that might somehow trigger a reflection of the past, some of this stuff comes back, and it's painful still. That's why I say it's traumatic. I think my personal opinion is that while I think we do recover and we do go on, I think these things leave a permanent impression, in our minds and in our hearts. I think that's why it's difficult when you grow up with domestic violence and abuse. Then the next topic that I have is impact of frequent moving during school year. Okay, this is another issue in my book because my family moved a lot, and it was done during the middle of the school year. And there have been studies, and I have two research articles, and I speak about one of them in my book, and one of them is by psychologist Oishi at the University of Virginia, and the other one is called Changing Places. It's another article, and Danielle has all these articles, so I emailed them to her, so at the end, later I think she's going to email everybody these articles, if you'd like to research them and look them up and learn more. Basically, moving impacts people in different ways. And what both of these studies show is that children who are extroverts will have an easier time adjusting to a new move because they can more easily reach out to people, they can more easily make new friends. Those of us who are introverts, more like myself, I think I'm kind of an introvert, will tend to have a more difficult time adjusting to a new move, especially if it's during the middle of a school year. And the reason is because people have already formed their friendships in the class. The curriculum, it's already in progress, the coursework during the school year, and it's a new environment to orient yourself to, new neighborhood. Everything that I knew, for example, I was disconnected from. So, and moving has stages too, because when you hear that you're going to move, your mind has to begin that disconnect phase. And what these studies show that how parents handle the move will affect children. For example, if the parents have a positive outlook on the move and can explain to the children why it's a move, and try to bring up the new things or the positive things about the move, that can help. And these studies also show that age, how old the children are, can affect them. The younger children will tend to have an easier time, according to these studies that were done by Oishi and by the article Changing Places. Because the younger the child is, it's just easier for them. I mean, they're not thinking so much about readjusting and asking too many questions, as a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old would. It might be a little easier for a 5-year-old or 6. However, the catch to this is that the study in Changing Places tells us that even though the children are young, they may not have the abstract reasoning thinking ability yet to reflect and ask questions about the move. If they are moved around frequently during the middle of the school year, they will likely have a difficult time grasping these fundamental skills that you get during the early grades, like for reading, for writing, for math. So basically, the conclusions for this study was that there really is no uniform answer as to how moving impacts children, because everyone is different. Extrovert, introvert, age, parental, how the parents view the move. But what they all conclude is that how the moving is that if, for example, that moving should be done sparingly, and it really should be done for a good reason. I mean, things like constant eviction or moving for no reason, which is what my parents were doing. There wasn't really a good reason to move in our case. Most of it was because of my father wasn't paying the rent, or we needed to go, or he just decided that he didn't want to stay somewhere because of the weather, and we were up and gone to a new place. So those are not good reasons. So as social workers, well, those of you who are out, or even want to become parents one day, I think, when you have clients in your office that are impacted by frequent moves, hopefully you can minimize that by helping parents develop strategies, by helping them to, depending on their children's age, to explain the move, helping them to develop good reasons for moving to wherever they're going, because also moving does have stages. Like I said, it's the disconnect phase, and then you have to go and you have to readjust and reconnect again to your new environment. Okay, so we are affected mentally, emotionally, and socially by moving. Mentally, you start to ask all these questions, and emotionally, you start feeling like sad, maybe happy, depends on how you're looking at the move. And then socially, you have to disconnect from your old friends and reconnect with new ones wherever you're going to go. And hopefully, you'll be accepted into your new school. Okay, my next topic that is in my book is effects of gambling on family. And I speak about this because my father was a gambler. He gambled. He was a nice man, when he wanted to be, but he had this habit. And I would categorize him probably as compulsive. Gambling, too, has different levels. I mean, some people are compulsive gamblers, which are those that, and I have one article on this as well that Danielle has, and Fong is the author's name, and he explains that compulsive gamblers will gamble pretty much away almost anything. They will literally, and this is true with my father, as the articles show, forget the time if they are gambling somewhere like in a racetrack, and they will literally, if they have money on hand, they are apt to gamble the whole amount without even thinking of the consequences to their family and to their loved ones. And my father did this. He gambled away the rent, one time. And my mom came to pick it up, and he called her he called her to tell her to come and get the money for the rent before he did something to it. And by the time my mom prepared and walked to the racetrack, he had already done his deed. So there you go. We didn't have the money for the rent. So emotionally, as kids, we were unhappy because we were not sure what would happen. Would we stay in our home? Would we be evicted? What would happen if we had to leave? And then mentally you start to think, and then you become tired, and then it affects you even in school, because you think, what's going to happen to us? And it's difficult to concentrate even in school. The article that Fong did it's a series, and then in his last article, I only have one that I emailed Danielle, but in the last of the series, he talks about who is likely to become a gambler, and what can be done to help gamblers. And this is something good for you to know, social workers especially. A lot of people become gamblers because, well, some of them are lonely, or maybe they want to escape from something, and they find it a pastime. And some people believe that if they gamble even $2, they might win $1,000. And even if they win once, like $500 or whatever, they go and re-gamble what they just won, thinking that they can make it $2,000. So there are two types of, at least, therapies that I read and I know of. One is Gamblers Anonymous, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, where they actually go and they don't give out their names, they just go to the support group and they have, like, I think 12 steps that they follow. I'm not sure of all the steps. But the point to that program is to hopefully keep them away from gambling. The other is cognitive therapy with actual counseling to get them to change their view, their thinking. Because the idea behind that is if you can get them to change their beliefs about gambling. Why are they gambling? Are they doing it because they want to feel like they want to win big? Then if cognitive therapy, if you can get them to see that they're not going to be able to achieve that, it's unrealistic for the most part. Because why? Because really gambling is not designed for the consumers to win for the most part. It's designed to make the gambling industry richer. So one thing is through cognitive therapy, if you can get them to understand that it might help to eventually minimize what they do. And then also money management strategies, having someone else manage their money, that's another thing. Because gambling is it really is a big issue. It affected my family a lot. We didn't even have food to eat at times. That's how bad it was. So if you can understand how to treat some of this and research it even more, some of these articles, hopefully when you get clients like this, you can get them to understand that they're not only hurting themselves, but their loved ones, people around them. Because one of the things with counseling or with anything is to understand that what we do, our actions not only impact ourselves most of the time, but they affect those around us. And this is very important. My next slide is impact of constant arguing and separation of parents on children. This is a very, very big point in my book because unfortunately there was a lot of domestic violence in my home. My parents would not only argue, but they would shove each other physically, and there was some physical abuse in my home. And that, it's, how can I explain it? I was affected mentally because I was always thinking, I hate it, I can't stand this, why don't they stop? Why can't they leave me alone? I was always pulled into the arguing, and it's not pleasant when you have to try to take the side of one parent or the other, and you don't want to take either side, because if you take the side of one, then the other becomes angry or wants to question you. Well, why did you take my side? Or why did you take this, his side, or whatever? So that's not pleasant. So the domestic violence in my home caused me a lot of times to want to explode and to also not to do well in school. And I have an article on this as well. And this is tricky also because the research shows that you don't want that you don't want kids to grow up in a home where both parents are constantly fighting, because that really affects them emotionally. And when there's that kind of trouble, the research in that article shows that usually kids can be pretty contented if their parents separate, because they'll have peace. But still, it's mixed, because and while in my book I do think that is true. Some of it is true. What the research shows, that I was happy when my parents separated at times, because I thought, yes, there's not going to be any more arguing. There will be peace in the house. Yet on the other hand, I was caught. I thought, well, I miss my father. I really want him back. I want to be able to sit with him and talk to him and read poetry with him, because these were things that I was doing with him that my mom was not doing with me, because poetry and that kind of thinking was not her specialty. She didn't like that kind of abstract thinking. My mom was more of a traditional Greek housewife. She'd only had a high school education and did not enjoy reading very much, but she had a lot of other good qualities. So research really shows that in those cases, kids can be happy, but on the whole, the article tells us that these kids, like me, will experience a drop in their grades potentially, and will need to talk to someone, which is, in a sense, how I felt. I always wanted to talk to someone, and unfortunately, I had good mentors. But through this domestic violence, okay, there were two moments that actually changed my life. I want to focus a little bit on the positive that in some ways that came out of it. I became very resilient. I was stubborn. I wanted to rise above that and be someone. I did not want these challenges to define what I would become. So my most trying moments were in 10th grade. We had just returned from a concert. I was in music. I loved music. So I was singing with the honors chorus, the county honors chorus where I live, with the orchestra. And we had just returned home. My father had cooked chicken. It wasn't the best meal. He burned it that day. I don't know why, but it wasn't. I guess he had to think about cooking and coming to pick me up from the concert, to take me back home. And so I didn't finish my meal. So then I went to my room and I started doing homework. I took out my history notes and I started writing. And from somewhere in the distance, I heard shouting. And I thought, my heart started to race. Here we go again. And my father was making physical threats towards my mother. And so Mom came rushing in. She said, I want to call 911. So we called 911, and the officers came quickly. And she said, well, I don't feel safe. I don't want to stay because I've called you guys, and my husband doesn't like the police, so I'm afraid if you leave, maybe he will really, really hit me. So we went to the women's shelter in Sarasota. And believe me, those 2 days were a life-changing experience. First of all, it was a sudden, abrupt uprooting. It was total confusion. And then new surroundings, but I had to make the best of it. So I went to bed, and then the next morning, I woke up, I met other children that were there. We spoke, I showed them my brailler, I had that with me, because the night before when we left, I was able to grab certain things. In my suitcase, there was a mad rush to pack everything that I wanted to take with me because I wasn't sure how long I'd be at the shelter. My father was threatening things, and he had also threatened to burn the house down, believe it or not. So I wasn't sure if I'd ever see it again. I had this fear. So this is how I was emotionally impacted. But one way I was impacted by this domestic violence. Anyway, so back at the shelter, one of the things that had to occur for Mom to keep staying there was the counselor said, well, you have to think if you really want a divorce or if you're going to file for an injunction. Which is, an injunction is when you feel that your life is threatened by someone, you file it at the courthouse and they have to stay in a certain radius away from you. We went to the courthouse with a counselor. She took the women that wanted to go. And ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that the floor for divorces and injunctions was packed. There were scores of people that were doing the same thing that my mom was doing, and I was only 16 at the time. My 16-year-old mind began to wonder at that instant, what was I doing here and what were all these people doing here? Why? Was there something that my parents or any one of these people could have done to reconcile their marriages? And what could I do differently from that moment on for the rest of my life to be a better person? And if God wanted, if I ever got married, how could I be careful and select a spouse that would love me for what I am and build with me and respect me, and I to do the same? Because I think that's what a relationship should be. It's respect and building and working together to accomplish something. And I told myself I would change. I would never repeat these things that my parents, these patterns, these dysfunctional patterns that my parents were doing. So that was, and I have, believe me, I mean, I have been very careful with my friendships, my relationships. I mean, I'm very selective. And also, I wanted to become a good person, a hardworking person. I made up my mind at that hour, at that courthouse, that's what I would become. So when we didn't stay at the shelter for very long, my mom decided after 2 days that we would return. And again, I had mixed feelings. Well, what would happen? Would my father come back? Was my mother going to really stay with the injunction and go ahead and file for divorce? But inwardly, I knew that she wouldn't. And even though I wanted to think about what I had wanted to set out to do at the courthouse in my mind, I really started to think about ending my life, which was really quite the other end of what I was thinking a couple days ago, earlier, which was being good and hardworking and wanting to meet that perfect spouse. And then when I was sitting one day thinking of these thoughts of maybe leaving the world, I had this feeling that no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't. That my life was precious, and I had to bounce right back out of it. And I really did. And I'm also a firm believer in God, and I think He had a hand in it. So I bounced back out of those thoughts, and what I did, I took a brave step, and I went and I went to my guidance counselor, and I explained the situation to her. What was going on, and she was puzzled. Because now this is good for you guys that are social workers, because you might encounter this, especially if you're doing guidance counseling. I told her that I really had to do something. I could not live like this anymore. I wanted stability in my house. What to do? I was a minor, so the law said I didn't have much choice. I had to go home at 16, unless if I emancipated myself, and got a lawyer and said that I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to do that. So I pushed and I begged, and my counselor relented, and we went to what's now called the Department of Children and Families. Well, over there, I met a social worker at the desk, and I explained what was going on, and we talked for a while, and we called the 800 number, and I filed a report, and I explained what was going on, and the counselor, the report was filed, and then 24 hours later, there was a social worker that was sent out to my home for an investigation. The social worker's investigation found that there was some neglect and emotional abuse, and the strategy was for us to try to have family meetings, as often as we could, to try to work it out, so that everybody is happy. And she wanted to help us to come up with strategies for everybody to speak, because we were probably my family with lack of communication. But now this is another issue that I'm going to bring out. My parents were Greek, straight out of Greece. So this is what cross-cultural counseling. In my family, it was not accepted very easily, what I did, counseling. Bringing in a stranger, it was considered bringing in a stranger to intervene or interfere in our problems. It was considered taboo, because why? Because it was considered family issues that needed to be resolved by us, by grandparents, or by the Greek Orthodox Church, not by someone else. So my father didn't quite like that, but he had no choice, and he had to deal with the social worker, so he spoke to her, and it sort of worked, because it really quieted the house down, because he became afraid that if he did not listen, and if he kept this up, maybe the social worker would come and remove my brother and me from the house. So it did work. But where it was tough was because I was a minor, and the law said something else. The law was considering me someone that I felt at the time like I didn't know what I was talking about, and my parents did, and I should just go home. But at 16, I felt like I wanted to fight for myself and make a change. So again, as social workers, if child abuse issues are issues that are interesting to you, maybe becoming agents of change, in that area, maybe by advocating for children more, so that their voices can be heard, so that they're not automatically considered minor, bye-bye. It really, really, really is painful when you're considered, because I knew what I was doing at 16, I was very intelligent, but yet I felt that the law downplayed my intelligence and my emotions. So really, I think that's one area that you guys can become agents of change for children. They need a voice. So anyway, but through all of this stuff, I became very resilient, and I went on, and I'm standing here talking to you today. Again, really I'll conclude this section by saying that I was affected mentally, emotionally, and physically by all these issues because I was tired, and emotionally because I was very despondent, I was very unhappy, and mentally I was always thinking why, hoping that things would change, hoping for a peaceful family environment that I didn't have, one that I created in my mind just to escape. That's how badly it became. And I speak about all this in my book. Again, and I mention these to you in categories like mentally, emotionally, and physically, because to show you that we are affected not just in one way, but in many ways when something is happening in our lives. Okay, now we're going to get to blindness. Okay, impact of blindness on children since birth. Okay, I'll start by saying, how do I view myself? Well, for me, I'm very, very happy. I am so happy to be here, to live and to share life with you and to share my experiences with you. I was premature and I was put in an incubator. I was 1 pound and 4 ounces. And back during the 1970s, there was very little understanding between high levels of oxygen and the potential of causing blindness to a premature infant. What happened was, I think that the blood vessels at the back of the eye began to grow too quickly because of the oxygen, and they cut, the retina became detached from the optic nerve, is basically what happened. They can't do anything, they cannot do much right now, but now, in today's times, for preemie babies, they try to stop this. If that happens, they go in and they counteract it with laser and injections and other stuff. So, but my time, it wasn't the case. So, basically, I have a really positive view of myself. I'm very happy. I think what's a little bit tiring sometimes is others, how others see me, the perceptions of others. Like, she can't do. Can she really cook? Will she fall? Will she? Can she learn? I mean, how can she do the job? So I constantly feel like I have to keep proving myself. I have to keep explaining, which is no problem. I mean, I love doing it. But then there are other times when I feel like, oh my gosh, I wish I could just be me, just be normal. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you about blind children is, my slide says needs, skills, and esteem from an early age. Okay. Children who are totally blind that I've never seen, they're not going to be able to visually take in their environment. Like, a young child can see how mom is holding the telephone to dial, how mom is stirring that soup in the kitchen, or how mom is cutting with a knife, or whatever, or how people dress, colors. So a blind child needs to be taught early, about telephones, how to hold them, how to dial, how to be independent. And the reason I keep emphasizing early is because these are very important socialization skills. I mean, my goodness, if you can't function, how are you going to get out later and go to school? How are you going to be able to present yourself to an employer if you're blind? How are you going to be able to stand before people like I'm doing today and speak? I mean, the world is a difficult place. It's not an easy place. It's a tricky place. And we live in times where it's a fast-paced world. So people are not always going to stop and help you. So you have to be able to function. So kids need a lot of skills. They need to be taught not to speak out of turn, how to stand in lines, how to form friendships, about looks, colors, everything. And they need to be held to a standard. I mean, I don't believe in lowering standards because someone is blind. Really, I don't believe in that. If you have a high-functioning child, like me, for example, people set a standard. I mean, don't let it go because someone can't see you. You dropped something, pick it up. You spilled something, clean it. You got homework, go and do it. My professors did not let go of their standards for me. They made accommodations, yes. There's a difference between an accommodation and a standard. Like, for example, here at UMBC, Professor Amari, whom I got to know very well, and Danielle, they worked hard to bring over a computer that had speech on it. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it to work on the screen that way. Otherwise, I'd be using my own. I'd be doing it myself. I'd be navigating through it. That's an accommodation for me to be able to navigate the computer by myself. But to decrease the standard by telling me, well, you can speak for 10 minutes, and it's okay if you forgot what you want to say. No, it's not okay, because I have a responsibility to myself, to the university, to all of you here today, and to the social work department and to Professor Amari's one who funded me to come here. So I have a standard too that I have to meet. Okay, my next topic is, again, it's going to independent living skills. And that's, independent living skills, it's broad. It's teaching blind kids from an early age how to cook, how to clean, how to vacuum, how to put away clothes, a lot of this stuff some of it was integrated into my academic curriculum. And I have another article that I included for Danielle to share with you. And this article, I can't remember its title right now, but it's talking about blind children and how it's not only important to place them like where they should be. For example, there's something in special education called the least restrictive environment, the LRE, which is, where do we place this blind child? Do we place them in a residential school for the blind, or do we put them in a school where they're with sighted children? Like I was mainstreamed for most of my schooling, so I was mainstreamed, yes. So this article says, which is also connects well with my life, which is, well, they're being mainstreamed, but are they getting their the skills that they need also in addition to academic to be able to function in society? So for me, there was after a certain times during the day, I would see my teacher of the visually impaired. She would come. She had an itinerant schedule, and we would work on certain things like how to hang up a coat, how to cut, how to do certain things. So I was getting not just my academic skills, by going to my classes, but some of those independent living skills. This is what the article is saying, that you have to have a balance between teaching these kids academics and their daily living skills, especially if they're going to be mainstream. So let's see, my next slide is need standards and expectations, which I was just speaking about that earlier. These kids, especially if they're high functioning like me, they have to have expectations, and they need to know that they're going to be expected to meet these standards and expectations, providing that that they're logical, they're realistic, like expecting them to do their homework. And also that they follow rules and social norms, that if you break the rule of something, that you're going to get punished for it, if it warrants it, because people have to learn cause and effect. Like if I do this, it's going to affect something else, because more than times in life, if we do something, it affects something else. It's like a chain, And again, I don't believe in lowering standards. So if you ever have blind peers, blind clients, blind students, or whatever, don't lower your standards for them, please. You're not doing them a favor. Because in the real world, it's not easy, it's tricky. Okay, now here's something else. The other topic is needs chances. Blind kids and teens, just like anyone else, need to be given chances. They need to be allowed to play. They need to be allowed to be in regular classes, to learn, to be on the debate team, for example, or do whatever activity they like to do, again, providing that it's realistic. For me, I felt like I wasn't always given chances in high school. I really wanted, I was in music. I was a music major at a magnet program. And there was a lot of skepticism about me, because it wasn't technology back then either to help with what we're doing now. Now we have iPads, we have iPhones, and all kinds of gadgets that talk. So there was a lot of skepticism, so I feel like I was doubted a lot for no reason. I mean, I really feel that my life could could have been even better if I had not been so doubted. I could have taken AP classes, honors classes, but there was this need to overprotect me by teachers and my parents. Well, could she handle the workload? Could she do it? In some respects, I can understand because I was struggling with English for a long time because I did not speak English at home. I spoke Greek. But I was also very intelligent still, and I wanted to be a part of Model UN. I wanted to do Youth for Understanding, which was to travel abroad in high school, but nope, I wasn't allowed to. She won't be able to do it. She'll fall, she'll get hurt, she won't be able to handle it. So all these things in some ways set me back. They were not working in my favor. Because when I even got to college, it was a big learning curve. And I really believe I was able to succeed in college because of my own determination. And my mentors, my professors who I got to know, let me do assignments, redo assignments at first until I got the hang of it. So, you know, again, really, these kids need chances, just like everyone else. And let's see, the other slide I have is allowed to explore. There's nothing wrong with allowing someone to explore, like and go to a social activity or take that honors class, you know, or whatever they want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, sighted people explore as well. So do we. We would like to explore and get out there. And at the same time, we have to be allowed to fail. It's a normal part of life, whether you are sighted or blind. Failure can teach you things, providing that it's not a failure that's going to really hurt you in the long run. That's like, let's say you take a class and you find that it's too much and you have to drop. Well, I guess someone might consider it a failure, but it really isn't. It teaches you how to balance things sometimes, or to say, well, you know, I really can't do this. I'll go back to it at a later time. You know, I think in today's times we tend to overprotect too much. You know, children of whatever, blind or sighted, running after them, afraid to let them play kickball, afraid to let them jump, afraid they're going to get hurt. We, you know, put everybody on medication. So that's what I have for this section. Now the next section is employment and blindness. Okay, and this is a big one. A lot of employers, not all of them, but a lot of them are very skeptical about hiring someone who is blind. And some of it has to do with people's own perceptions of blind people, their own misinformation or lack of information about the technology that's out there, their own unwillingness to step outside their comfort zones and try something different and learn something new. And the other biggie is the Americans with Disabilities Act. People seem to be afraid of this act. They ask, well, can I get sued? If I hire a blind person, will I have to spend money to accommodate? What does it mean? Will my insurance rates go up? What if that person falls? If the person is not performing to standards, can I let go of that person without becoming sued? Being sued by the person. And the answers are really, I mean, of course, anyone can be sued these days. But the Americans with Disabilities Act, what it is it's a very comprehensive piece of legislation. I don't even know everything. It's like 100 pages. And it was passed in 1990. It's really comprehensive, and it was passed because it was supposed to combat discrimination in like all sectors of life, like in restaurants if you have a guide dog, in universities, like for accommodation, in the workplace. The ADA doesn't really pertain to just blindness. Really, it's so vague. It's a lot of different disabilities, and I think now even HIV is under, like for example, under the ADA. The problem with the issue with the ADA is that it says that when you go to accommodate, it's reasonable accommodation. So that reasonable leaves it very wide open. And in some ways, I can understand why, because there's no way for the ADA itself to actually be able to foresee everybody's needs, because everyone does things differently. What what one person might request as an accommodation, I might not need it. I might be okay without it. So basically what agencies and schools need to do is just it's what reasonable accommodation. They don't have to spend like thousands and thousands and thousands to accommodate someone. And there is help out there. For example, the Division of Blind Services, which is what it's called in Florida, but I think some states call it the Commission for the Blind. They can help the employer with accommodating sometimes. They might buy that computer that, let's say, a blind person might need. They might buy that speech synthesizer like I use. It's called JAWS, JWS for the acronym. They might buy that iPad for me, for example. So there is help out there, and and yes, the employer can reasonably fire someone if that person is not performing. It's just like everyone else. If they cannot do the job, not really because of the blindness, let's say, but because they're late, or because they're slacking on the job, they're talking on the cell phone, and they're not heeding the boss's warnings, yes, and that employer can let go of someone. And no, the employer's insurance rates will not go up for hiring someone. And yes, we are capable. And no, we're not going to fall and hurt ourselves in the workplace. So those are really, I think with the ADA, there's a lot of fear. So the question with the ADA is, has it really helped or hurt? And there's a debate. There's always this ongoing debate about this issue. I think that in many ways, I think it has helped because it's encouraged organizations and places to make changes that they otherwise might not have done. My own preference, because I'm really like a pacifist, I love peace, I love people, would be to see a world where we don't have to have civil rights legislation such as the ADA to do the right thing. I think these things should be intrinsic. These things should come from our hearts to do what is right for our fellow man and for each other. But that's the idealistic world, and I think some people do that, and we can begin to do that, and you can begin to do that even today for each other, by thinking about what can we all do for one another that's right, that helps to promote change in a better world. But also, again, there's this need, I guess, to protect democracy and to protect the need for change. That's why we have these laws. So really, has it helped? I think yes. Again, because it's really encouraged places to build ramps, to like, for example, UMBC, for example, all the computers in the computer lab have JAWS on them. So so that's really, really good. On the other hand, it's created something else which really concerns me. Everyone is trying to be politically correct, whatever that is to me. Like, if people have become afraid to ask questions. Okay, for one thing, do they call me blind? Do they call me visually impaired? Folks, I'm blind. I'm blind, that's it. But people call me visually impaired. But what is that? That's so general. It's very broad, because there are different types of visual impairment. So I have no reservations about saying, you know what, I'm blind. That's me. So I'm really concerned about this political correctness and employers feeling afraid to ask questions about accommodation because they're afraid they're going to get sued. So this is another thing that the ADA has kind of created this fear. I think if you're going to ask someone a question that's non-related to their work, like, well, but you can't see, how do you put on your makeup? I guess you could ask that if the person is going into, maybe if you want to do some styling or whatever, that's the job, but if, I don't think that's necessary if you're going to apply for a teaching position. I think with what you can ask, let's say, if you're the interviewee in that regard is, how would you teach them? Can you tell me how you would go about presenting your lessons, to the students so they can visually see it, so they can see it? Then I would say, well, I use PowerPoint, I use Microsoft Word, and I connect the computer to the LCD like it is today, and I have speech on it, and that's how I do my lesson plans. That's how I would